The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Sunday, the 20th of July, 2025. And Mary, what a week.
What a week.
Well, we're going to start with the first article. We're going to talk about the Senate hearing. Maybe we ought to look at the system. Senate hearing on vaccine injuries sparks talks of reforms. U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal and Ron Johnson broke new ground on Tuesday at the subcommittee hearing on vaccine injury when they criticized liability protection for the pharmaceutical industry and discussed co-sponsoring a bill banning pharmaceutical ads on TV. So I think the best thing, Mary, if possible, if you can talk about why we were even there in the first place.
Yes. So Senator Johnson ran for a third term in the Senate, really specifically to deal with the issue of vaccines and vaccine injury. So he's had many briefings under the last administration about injuries from the COVID shots, what was happening during COVID. And then earlier this year, he had a first formal hearing as the chair of the permanent subcommittee on investigations under the Homeland Security Committee. He held a meeting about myocarditis and COVID, and he used information in part that Children's Health Defense put together. But this hearing was really to start to look at what's going on with the childhood vaccine schedule. And so we were privileged, Polly, to be assisting the committee and Senator Johnson on information about that. And I was really thrilled that both Dr. Brian Hooker, our chief science officer, and you, our chief of CHD TV, were invited to testify, to talk about your sons, Billy and Steve, both of whom were severely injured and had regressive autism as a result. But we also included in the hearing were Emily Tarcell, whose daughter, Chris, died from the HPV, the Gardasil shots, and also Crystal Cordingley, whose son Corbin died very early in life, a so-called SIDS baby, from the various vaccines that he was given on one day.
Flu vaccine.
Yeah. And then then the ranking member, Senator Blumenthal, asked to have two people included who were the victims of infectious disease, of flu. And Senator Johnson appropriately said, yes, by all means, the whole thing is an issue, right? Not only the vaccines, but also the diseases that they allegedly prevent. And so there were 6 speakers. The hearing room was full. The audience was very respectful. The people with different points of view were sort of interspersed in the people testifying. Senator Johnson was the only senator who stayed for the whole hearing, which always disappoints me. Senator Blumenthal was there for most of it. He's the ranking member. And then Senator Moreno of Ohio came and spoke, and others sort of showed up, but very, very briefly. And according to Senator Johnson, this is fairly common because, in fact, they are incredibly busy. But what was so surprising, Polly, which is what this article pulls out, is that Senator Blumenthal started out with an opening statement that was very hostile, saying, this is misinformation and, vaccines save lives and vaccines are safe and effective. It was the narrative, right? It was what we fully expect. That's how he started. But after he listened to your testimony and Brian's and Emily's and Crystal's and the others from the flu, he really seemed different and said, wow, Brian Hooker mentioned that there had been destruction of documents that Will Thompson at CDC had testified to around thimerosal. And he's like, well, I'm a lawyer and destruction of evidence is always absolutely wrong. And then it kind of led to conversations about direct-to-consumer advertising, about reforming the injury compensation program. Brian said he'd been in the compensation program for his son Steve for 16 years with no positive results. And they also talked about the problems of any liability shield for industry. It takes away any incentive to be safe. So we'll definitely be following up with Senator Blumenthal. There's no guarantee that where this will lead. But Polly, to have the ranking Democratic member talk with the chairman of the committee about direct-to-consumer advertising, reforming the VICP, the hazards of liability protection, and how abhorrent it is to destroy evidence, that was really surprising, candidly, and really, really welcome. And it makes us believe that there may be more opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, and my big passion is the bonuses for pediatricians, and Ron Johnson wants to know more about that. Senator Johnson wants to know more about that, so I'm excited for that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge thing, how this has all been incentivized and how the pediatricians have clear, overt conflicts of interest, and that they're not then treating the individual child, but they're really trying to make their bonuses. So I do think that's a topic of great interest that you and Brian mentioned. Maybe others mentioned, but I didn't hear Senator Blumenthal pick up on that. But it's an obvious conflict of interest, and definitely one that I think should be brought much more to public attention.
Yeah, so if you're a pediatrician out there and you know more about this and the incentives and that kind of thing, please do contact us at CHD TV or CHD, because we really want to hear more about that. Moving on, Michael Nevadakis in The Defender, an encouraging sign: 60% of pregnant women and young mothers may delay or refuse routine vaccinations for kids. The results of 2 nationwide surveys suggest a growing number of new and expectant mothers are questioning the safety, efficacy, and necessity of vaccines for their kids. The results track with a recent poll conducted by Zogby Strategies and funded by Children's Health Defense, showing 60% of parents of young children believe it's time to review the childhood vaccine schedule. Quite right.
What we're seeing, Polly, is the after effects of COVID. People are using their heads, and they recognize that the government's not necessarily going to tell them the truth. It obviously didn't tell them the truth about the COVID shots. And so people are now much more skeptical. So it's almost an irony, Polly, because I think the government thought, oh, wow, we're just going to make vaccines, mandated, and everybody's going to say, oh, thank God they're protecting us. And exactly the opposite has happened, that people said, oh my God, these products are not safe. You lied to us. Now we're going to question everything. So it's good.
It is good. Okay, Suzanne Burdick in The Defender, study claiming no link between aluminum in vaccines and autism, riddled with flaws, critics say. Danish researchers claim they found no link between aluminum in vaccines and 50 negative health outcomes, including autism, asthma, autoimmune disorders. But critics say the study has numerous flaws that misrepresent aluminum's impact on health. Wow. Well, we've seen a lot of injury from aluminum in vaccines.
This is a gaslighting article by Dr. Hvid in Denmark, and he's done lots of these over the years. We have been taking down Dr. Hvid for a long time. But what's most interesting to me in this article, Polly, is that Chris Exley, arguably the world's greatest expert on aluminum, says he never thought that the aluminum industry would be running scared, but that's what they're doing now, because the spotlight is coming onto aluminum in vaccines.
Yeah, well, I feel like this big announcement that's supposed to be happening in September, everybody's panicking. So I wonder if that article has something to do with that.
Yeah.
Okay, James Lyons-Weiler in The Defender, NPR misled on every count in reports defending thimerosal in vaccines. All 4 core arguments published on July 6th by National Public Radio misrepresent toxicological science, omit key mechanistic evidence, and fail to meet the standard of informed biomedical commentary. This is according to James Lyons-Weiler, PhD.
This is a great article about the lies being told about thimerosal. So, as you know, at the recent Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, the ACIP meeting, they said no more thimerosal ever again in any vaccines, including multi-dose flu vaccines, which thimerosal had been staying in there. And it's a big deal, as James Lyons-Weiler points out here. There continued to be almost 9 million exposures to injected mercury through what the CDC was permitting. Those will now stop. But NPR was trying to pretend like, oh, this is cosmetic, it's a nothing burger. That's just not true. any kind of mercury is a toxic exposure, and they should obviously never be in vaccines. And thankfully, they're no longer there. And it just, sadly, this article and James Lyons Weiler's critique of it really shows us that National Public Radio has become a propaganda organ for government policy and for pharmaceutical manufacturing policy.
Madhava Sethi, a medical doctor in The Defender, his headline here, Dr. Paul Offit thinks we should be scared, but for the wrong reasons. Offit warned that Americans should be scared after the CDC vaccine expert, Dr. Fiona Havers, resigned, citing concerns about the future of vaccine policy under Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But shouldn't we be more scared that the AAP is pushing COVID-19 shots for healthy kids when the shots have less than 1 in 1,000 chance of providing any benefit while carrying unknown risks? I'm not sure they're completely unknown risks. I think we've heard from the parents that there's a lot of risks.
Yeah. This is another great article by a really credentialed author, Madhava Sethi, and he basically he goes through this presentation by this, public servant at CDC for 13 years, Dr. Havers, and he explains what a ridiculous presentation it was about the safety and effectiveness of COVID shots for children. They had no unvaccinated control, the usual. And so it's just, he explains sort of through this presentation, the regulatory capture that's happened and how Dr. Offit is defending them, and how this is just, we're moving past this, this is not going to continue.
Okay, Michael Nevadakis in The Defender. A new study stokes debate. Did mass vaccination fuel new COVID variants? The authors of the new peer-reviewed study said that their findings demonstrate the potential for new approaches for detecting and treating COVID-19 that would be effective for all variants. Some scientists said the study also supports the theory that mass vaccination may have prolonged the pandemic.
So this is a really interesting article. It quotes, it's sort of based on reporting from Trial Site News, an excellent publication that's following the medical dimensions of all of this. And it quotes Dr. Vanden Bosch quite a bit, that it's showing that there's this striking evolutionary shift after the initial variants of the COVID shots and then the vaccines coming out. And it seems as if, these viruses are alive too. They are mutating to be less susceptible to the vaccines, and they're causing more mild disease. And so they're saying, our own scientist, Carl Jablonowski, is saying it looks like COVID is slated to become basically a mild common cold going forward.
Which I feel like a lot of us thought it was from the beginning. Anyway, just saying. Okay, Michael Nevadakis in The Defender. Massey proposes to make COVID vaccine makers liable for injuries, opening doors for thousands of lawsuits. He introduced legislation to repeal the sweeping liability shield that exempts COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers from responsibility for serious injuries or death caused by their products. Legal experts say the bill would open the door for thousands of lawsuits, including lawsuits directly targeting vaccine makers. Now, Massey where is he?
Kentucky. He's a congressman, long-term congressman from Kentucky. He was a kind of a computer entrepreneur, and he's now a farmer, and he's been really super on lots and lots of issues that we really care about. And as our own associated attorney Ray Flores points out, this bill probably doesn't have really high chances of passing right now, but I am so grateful to Congressman Massey for elevating this issue. As an attorney we work with as well, Rick Jaffe, says in this article, the PrEP Act is a legal black hole. That's exactly what it is. You fall into it and there's no law, there's no remedy, there's no information. It's obviously unconstitutional. We have been challenging the PrEP Act for some time judicially, but for sure, the best resolution would simply be a repeal. And this is called the PrEP Repeal Act. So I am really thrilled to see this. And I'm even hopeful that maybe we can get Congressman Massey to come on and talk about this.
Yeah, that'd be great. This is in the Government News Watch in The Defender. It's NBC News reporting charges dropped against Utah doctor accused of destroying $28,000 in COVID vaccines. The federal government dismissed charges against a Utah plastic surgeon accused of throwing away these COVID-19 vaccines, giving children saline shots instead of the vaccine, and selling fake vaccination cards. Dr. Moore gave his patients a choice when the federal government refused to do so, says U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. He did not deserve the years in prison he was facing. It ends today. That's
wow.
amazing.
Polly, I have to tell you, I was surprised by this one. I did not expect them to dismiss the charges. I expected that he would be convicted and then that President Trump would pardon him, because it's obviously wrong to send a compassionate doctor to jail, as we're dealing with in some other cases. But I was candidly really happily surprised to see that Pam Bondi dropped the charges. That does not happen very often in vaccine related criminal charges at all. So this was really good news.
Yeah, really good news.
And I think our colleague Brian Hooker is interviewing Dr. Kirk Moore. So I'm actually really excited about that too.
Excellent. Michael Nevadakis, the defender, jury awards $4 million to St. Louis School employees denied religious exemption from COVID vaccines. The 13 current and former public school employees in the federal jury trial sued the district after being placed on unpaid administrative leave in 2021. The school district accepted medical exemptions, but they discriminated against us and they chose to deny every single religious exemption that was submitted, said Wanda Brendan, the lead plaintiff.
So this is fascinating, Polly. Every other school district did accept some religious exemptions. This school district only accepted medical exemptions and refused every single religious exemption. And so this was an 11-day jury trial, and the jury came back with this $4 million judgment. $1 million for these 13 plaintiffs was actual damages, but almost $3 million was punitive damages. In other words, the way that the school district acted with respect to their religious exemptions shocked the conscience. That's typically the standard for punitive damages. In other words, this jury of the peers of these people working in the schools were horrified. They were shocked by the ill treatment that these people got. So this is really exciting. Also, this article points out that the support for religious exemptions post-COVID has more than doubled. So people are getting it, right? You have to be able to act out your faith. And the law is set up, and our Constitution is set up with very few exceptions to honor that.
Brownson Institute in the Defender, Europe's plummeting fertility rates, a mystery or a failure to analyze the data. Charts show falling birth rates for countries across Europe beginning in 2022, and data sheets break down the COVID-19 vaccination status of new mothers in the Czech Republic. And why aren't the governments interested in putting it all together and finding answers? Why indeed, Mary?
Well, this is a really powerful article by a Czech scientist, and he's pointing out that not only was there a sharp decline in the Czech Republic in 2022, 9 months after the shots were being rolled out, but that's true of many other similarly situated countries: Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Finland, Hungary. Not every country, but those countries with high vaccination rates also saw a 30% drop in fertility starting in 2022. But the really critical thing, Polly, is that decline in fertility continues. You would think that it might be a transient effect if it were sort of a transient effect of the vaccine. 5 years later, 4 years later, the decline in fertility is still continuing. And so he says, if this continues for another 5 years, the world is totally transformed, right? When you talk about all kinds of like pensions and other things, it's the biggest fertility drop in human history, he says. And so this author for Brownstone is really appalled that Europe seems not to want to look at the data. We've got to keep looking at this data, Polly. It is really, really important.
3 new plaintiffs asked to join COVID vaccine injury lawsuit against Bill Gates. 3 people injured by COVID-19 vaccines. They asked to join this Dutch lawsuit against Bill Gates and Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla and 15 other defendants. The lawsuit alleges the defendants knowingly misled the public about the safety of vaccines.
So, Polly, this is a super exciting case going on in the Netherlands, and a friend to CHD, attorney Micah Terhorst, is following this closely. So the defendants here, Gates, Bourla, Ursula von der Leyen, Ruth, the leaders in Europe and the US of the COVID paradigm, are being sued, and it looks like 5 experts will be allowed to testify, including Catherine Austin Fitts, Sasha Latipova, Catherine Watt, Michael Yeadon, and Joseph Sansone. So this is huge, actually. We have not had this kind of a trial happen yet. And it's happening despite the fact that one of the key lawyers for the plaintiffs in this case was attacked in some way, was put in prison. We need to get more information on this. This is really, really fascinating. This trial could be very, very instrumental.
Yeah. Michael Navadakis and Brenda Belletti together jointly writing this in The Defender. The DOJ backs children's health defense in antitrust suit against big media. So I'm going to hand that straight over to you, Mary.
Oh man, this is big news, Polly. This is really good news this week. We've had a lot of good news, but this is very good news. So in this case that we, Children's Health Defense, have brought together with lots of other smaller media outlets, Joseph Mercola, Gateway Pundit, The Truth About Cancer, some individual chiropractors, Creative Destruction Media. We brought this because the Washington Post, Reuters, and Associated Press, BBC, they were in a cartel to squash us, the independent voices on social media. And they were very clear about it. We need to strangle these smaller things while we can, because they are stealing our lunch. They are getting market share, and we, legacy media and social media that we're partnered with, we don't want that to happen. And so the head of the antitrust division at the Department of Justice, Abigail Slater, submitted a 22-page statement of interest. And she submitted it early, Polly. She had until the 18th. She submitted it before that, saying that antitrust laws are to protect free markets, including the free marketplace of ideas. So this is really a big deal. This case has been sort of languishing in federal court in Washington, D.C. This gives this case new momentum. And candidly, Polly, I won't be surprised if the defendants now in this case are much more interested in talking about settlement, because I doubt that they really want there to be discovery in this case, which could reveal really the extent of this cartel and the extent of this violation of antitrust laws to suppress independent media.
Okay, one to watch. Okay, let's go to the UK. So The Guardian first. Parents urged to get children vaccinated after a measles death in Liverpool. Now it says here, the child reportedly died. I mean, either died or did not die at Alderhay Hospital amid surge of measles cases in the city. They say the spike in infections is due to falling vaccination rates. They then go on to say the child was ill with measles and, this is important, other health problems. They can't comment on the individual case, and then they bang on about herd immunity. And then let's go to The Telegraph, which is another British paper. I didn't vaccinate my children with the MMR jab, but now I'm having regrets. So the usual coming out here, following the news of a child's death from measles. So they're now pushing up that death from measles, just like we saw over here in America, with the child, of course, with underlying health issues. We don't know if the child was vaccinated, and I would think it probably was, because otherwise they would say unvaccinated child dies of measles. And it bangs on about Andy Wakefield. Of course it does. But I just want to warn the British people that we've been through this in America, and it's your turn now, and you better be super careful about what they're printing. It's just ridiculous.
It's fear-mongering.
As you said, Mary, leading up to the schools reopening for the fall and stuff, they're going to be starting to do this anyway.
For sure.
We thought we'd bring you the weirdest article of the week again. Well, this is Fox 10. One person dies of the plague in North Arizona. The person died the same day they showed up at the Flagstaff Medical Center with symptoms. There's only around 7 cases reported each year in the US. Well, that's news to me. The person tested positive for Yersinia pestis, which is the bacteria that causes the plague. The person isn't identified, so we know nothing about this person whatsoever. And then it says a prairie dog is suspected to be the culprit. But then health officials say, actually, it's not the prairie dog.
The Black Plague in Europe, Polly, they believe was caused by fleas infesting the rats. And so this is the idea that these are the fleas infesting the prairie dogs. And this person in northern Arizona somehow came into contact with the prairie dogs and developed the plague. Who the hell knows?
Well, it's not the dog anymore. Dogs
Who
left.
knows? And they say, the plague is actually very treatable today with antibiotics. These stories definitely are a part of a background of fear. Take your shots, infectious disease is scary. You could die. And, infectious disease is real, Polly. We don't want to ignore the reality, but we also don't want to fall for the gaslighting. And this story with no detailed information is just gaslighting.
It's extraordinary to me how they can never release the identity of anyone if they don't want to. But then if it's the two girls in Texas, they can release whatever they like and say whatever they like. It's just very one-sided, this whole thing. Okay, let's talk about weight loss. This is in the Defender. Their rubber stamp is reckless after AAP endorses weight loss drugs for kids. Prescriptions soar. Researchers who analyzed more than 310,000 health records found that prescriptions for GLP-1 drugs for children and teens aged 8 to 17 increased. I can't imagine giving an 8-year-old a weight loss drug or any drug, to be honest. 65% immediately followed AAP's recommendation and another 5% per month after that. AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, which are not our favorite people right now.
No, they've never been our favorite people. Polly, this is so tragic. I actually did a CHD TV interview with Dr. Michelle Pirro, who says that this is reckless, a pediatrician. I am so worried about this, as she is. So, these prescriptions have gone up. They're covered by Medicaid, I guess in a compulsory way. The kids will stay thin while they're on the drugs. When you go off the drugs, there's no guarantee that you'll keep the weight off. The shots cause muscle loss. They basically make you feel full, but they have incredible serious side effects. They have no idea what this is going to do long term for these children who get them. These drug makers are now set to target children. These drugs in the US are very expensive. It's about $1,000 a month, and taxpayers are paying for it because it's going through Medicaid. I am so worried about what's going to happen to these kids, Polly. Obesity is very serious, don't get me wrong, but you're not solving the underlying problem. You're making them dependent on a drug whose side effects are already known and has many unknown side effects for children. So it's tragic to me. It's really tragic.
It's awful. Okay, Brenda Belletti in the Defender. Trump's DOJ says EPA will appeal landmark fluoride ruling. The decision to appeal came from the Solicitor General at the DOJ, who reports to Pam Bondi and the White House. In February, a federal judge ruled against the EPA, concluding that water fluoridation at current levels poses an unreasonable risk to children's health and ordering the EPA to address the issue.
This one surprised me, Polly, because, in fact, as the article points out, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Lee Zeldin, had done a tour with Bobby Kennedy at HHS around the country to talk about how great it is that they're getting fluoride out of the water supply. The judge's ruling in the lower court, Judge Chen, is a very thorough, very comprehensive 80-page decision about how fluoridation of the water is posing an unreasonable risk to young children and fetuses. So I was surprised to see that the EPA is going to appeal. Perhaps they're doing this. Well, I think clearly they're doing this on behalf of their industry supporters, right? They're doing this on behalf of companies. They're appealing this to support the companies that pollute, including those, fluoride is a toxic pollutant. Maybe the good part, the silver lining of this, Polly, is that the Ninth Circuit, in my opinion, is likely to side with the district court that did a very thorough job. And actually that will make the eradication of fluoridation water that much more secure. So it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but it's, going to take more time and waste more money of us taxpayers to achieve what they know, which is that fluoride is extremely toxic and should not be put in everybody's water supply.
Right. Okay, EPA releases everything we know on contrails and geoengineering. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said many Americans have urgent and important questions about weather and climate modification measures and deserve honesty and transparency. In response, the agency launched several websites stating there's nothing to worry about.
So this is disappointing, Polly, but it's interesting. So again, this looks like pretty, semi-sophisticated gaslighting. So Dane Wigington, whom we work with closely on geoengineering, says, this is Zeldin doing damage control. People are actually really asking a lot of questions, but this is gaslighting. It's not really going to work. Interestingly, right after this came out from Director Zeldin on his Twitter or his X account, Nicole Shanahan, Robert Kennedy's running mate when he was running for president, she came out with a very long, detailed post on X showing the reality of all of the contracts, not only for government-run geoengineering, but also for cloud seeding operations on a commercial basis throughout the country. And she's actually calling for a constitutional amendment that the government cannot modify our weather. So again, I think this is fascinating. I hope we can get her to come on to talk about that really fascinating and important post on geoengineering.
Absolutely. We have a conference in November, the Children's Health Defense Conference, and we hope to see you all there. We'll put the link in the show notes. It's in November. There's going to be some great speakers that we'll start to announce very, very shortly. So do sign up for that. If you can get here to Austin, we'd be thrilled to see you and meet you. And I just know that we're going to have some great people there. So
it's going to be really something. And we're going to be getting ready for 2026, Polly. And 2026 is going to be a very important year that really is decisive of, can we keep this movement going and making strides in Congress, or are things going to kind of simmer back down in ways that would be unfortunate? So we're going to be getting ready in November for the next year, which is going to be a critical one.
Yeah, and tomorrow on Good Morning CHD, I'm hosting with Dr. Larry Pileski, and he's going to come on and talk to us about the bullying in pediatric offices and why you may be asked to leave that pediatric office. So I'm excited to have him on tomorrow to continue uncovering the pediatricians. So there's that. So we've got an exciting week ahead for you. So do stay tuned into us. Thank you to all our viewers, and thank you particularly to our viewers for your massive support on Tuesday. I saw a lot of your comments and they were really uplifting and positive for Children's Health Defense. So we really appreciate you, that some of you are there every single day, and we really appreciate you and know you and see you. So there's that. And now we're going to go to our geoengineering, and then we're going to go to our unvaxxed story of the day. So from Mary and I, pray big, stand firm, never settle, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Polly. Thanks, everybody.
I'm Claire Dooley, you're watching CHD TV, and this is the Geoengineering Report, where we identify the threat in the skies. From emergency descents to unexpected turbulence, pilots are reporting strange new flight risks. What's changed in our upper atmosphere? In this episode, we examine how atmospheric heating and heavy metal particulates are affecting aviation in ways the public isn't being told. Dane Wigington with geoengineeringwatch.org explains why planes are struggling in modern skies and what it means for the future of travel and for our health.
Planes. They're saying that someone in the military was saying that more little tiny planes, little one-engine aircraft are going down with no explanation, like never before. People have experienced turbulence like never before. Is this because the planes are struggling to get through the geoengineered weather, clouds, whatever you want to call it?
Certainly it's involved, yes. Also, we've been contacted at geoengineeringwatch.org twice by pilots that fly private jet aircraft. They're former military pilots, and they fly very important people in private jets, and they were extremely alarmed that their jets were forced into emergency auto descent from above 40,000 feet because the air was so warm, about 45 degrees higher than it should have been. The air wasn't dense enough to carry that aircraft, and that's extremely alarming to them. So again, yeah, when you're playing weather whack-a-mole with climate engineering operations, of course you're going to disrupt every natural pattern in existence, and there's nothing that's not impacted by what they're doing. This is, again, the greatest assault the human race has ever launched against the web of life and the planet's life support systems. and all of it's toxic. You would think people that even don't know or want to know the intricacies of these operations, wouldn't you think that they would care that what you see in the sky, enough particulate matter to cover entire horizons continuously, all of it settling down to the planet, all of it infiltrating everything we eat, drink, and every breath we take? Wouldn't you think that any rational person would be concerned about that, Polly?
Yeah. I think we've got a situation where people actually don't want to fly anymore. Would you fly?
No, I haven't flown for 30 years.
Because of this situation?
There's multiple reasons for that, but, and now we're into another aspect, immediate existential threat of climate engineering. So it's not just the particulate matter you're breathing in much higher concentrations when you fly, and you are, because the cabin air, much of it comes from the exterior. And we know that. We've tested that as well. We took a NOAA flying lab. For listeners that don't know, the dimming documentary available for free on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. We made it available for free the day it was done, in spite of spending well into six figures on that film. But we tested with a NOAA flying lab at altitude what heavy aircraft were emitting, found exactly what we knew we'd find, climate engineering elements, starting with aluminum nanoparticles. For your listeners that don't know, aluminum toxic to all life forms, period. No exceptions. And it doesn't exist. People would say, well, it's the Saharan dust storm delivering aluminum from Africa in the sand, or, they come up with every possible excuse. Aluminum doesn't exist in free form naturally in the environment, period. If we're finding it in free form being dispersed from heavy aircraft, it's being mined and refined and dispersed. It's a primary climate engineering element. So you're flying through thicker concentrations of that if you're flying. And two, you're exposed to much more radiation now when you fly. The ozone layer is being systematically broken down by climate engineering. And that by itself, if we had no other threats, that threat alone is an extremely near-term existential threat. We had probably the world's foremost expert, former NASA contract engineer working for geoengineeringwatch.org with equipment that we supplied him, state-of-the-art equipment, measuring surface UV radiation. So we're told that 95% of incoming UV radiation is UVA, 5% is UVB, and no UVC, and certainly no X-ray. That's the lowest level of UV radiation, the most dangerous level, of course. Polly, have you felt how hot the sun feels on an unobstructed day, and surfaces, how hot they feel? And have you felt that intensity?
Yeah, of course. I can't even walk on the ground sometimes with bare feet.
It's incredibly hot. And again, we're seeing railroad tracks buckle and trains derail from this. I mean, it's runways at airports so hot that the asphalt's starting to melt and the planes are sinking into the tarmac. I mean, what's it take to wake people up? It's killing insects. It's killing plankton. So climate engineering, back to the flying and the decimation of the ozone layer, you're exposed to much more radiation at altitude, which is a problem as well. We know we're getting UVC on the surface, which is a DNA damaging spectrum of radiation. That's why there's so much skin cancers now. It's off the charts. And we think we are seeing some signs of X-ray as well now. And again, that's the lowest spectrum of UV radiation. And if that's the case, we are perilously close to functional collapse of the ozone layer, which means you cannot grow food. It means that whatever is stocked and stored is all we're going to have. And then we're talking about Mad Max times 8+ billion people.
We love hearing from you at CHD TV. We always are going through your emails and, sending them to each other and discussing the pictures you're sending and, whatever comments you're making. So please continue doing so. You can reach out to us at goodmorning@chd.tv. Thank you so much for watching the Geoengineering Report, and we'll see you next time on CHD TV.
UVC radiation is used as a germicidal radiation. It kills all DNA.
And you are metering UVC radiation on the surface now.
Yes.
This is Dane Wigington with Geoengineering Watch. UVCradiationWatch.org. This is the second segment and conclusion to my dialogue with a former NASA contract engineer who has been monitoring UV radiation with state-of-the-art lab equipment supplied by geoengineeringwatch.org. The graphics shown in this presentation depict live readings of deadly UVC radiation on Earth's surface. This frontline data completely refutes the official narrative that no UVC radiation reaches Earth's surface. Earth's ozone layer that would normally shield us from UVC radiation is in the process of collapsing. It has been continuously damaged by countless forms of anthropogenic sources of pollution, the largest among them being the ongoing covert global climate engineering operations. These operations include the spraying of climate engineering elements into the atmosphere and storm systems, and the microwave transmission manipulation of the air masses that are saturated with these elements. The collapsing ozone layer poses an extremely near-term existential threat to all life on the planet. The damage already inflicted is beyond grave. To learn more about this dire situation, please continue listening to part 2 of my discussion with a former NASA contract engineer.
We're already past the point of any return to the planet we've known. Can we still salvage something? Time will tell. How do you feel, based on the lack of willingness of your colleagues, your science colleagues, to acknowledge the severity of this situation?
It's sad. These guys are just after their research projects. You know, they need that funding. They need to pay their bills. They don't want to get caught up in controversy. That's the number one issue. If there's a controversial public issue, they don't want their name mentioned. Nobody wants to make the news. If you want to see how nature does things, you have to study nature. Nature does things perfectly. We have a tendency to screw up everything we touch. And they've touched geoengineering. They've made changes to our atmosphere. The chlorofluorocarbons, yeah, that was an issue, but it was not as great an issue as what they made it out to be about the ozone hole off of Australia and Antarctica.
In many ways, covering the tracks of climate engineering, would you agree?
Exactly. These people want to control the weather.
It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
What level of insanity would drive a person to emphatically rant about that with such enthusiasm, as if that could lead anywhere except total planetary omnicide? And that's indeed the path we're on.
That's where we're at. We're almost there. It's not going to be long. You know, my grandkids are not going to have children of their own. That's the long and the short of it, Dane.
But even that is an optimistic timeline, is it not, Ray? I mean, if on the current trajectory, we're facing statistically, mathematically, statistically speaking, no functional wildlife populations left on planet Earth by 2026. We've already lost 80 to 90% of Earth's insect populations. The oceans are dying by the day. We've lost 90% of the pelagic fish populations, the food fish in the oceans. And our forests around the world, all of them, without exception, dying. And although some look better than others, again, if they're in the constantly engineered cool down zone of the eastern U.S., they look better than other regions of the world. And for people that live in those regions, it's profound. I've certainly seen this over and over. If the tree out in front of their house doesn't look that bad, then everything must be fine all over the world. And that's truly a myopic view. If we consider the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48, statistically, that's 1/200th of the Earth's surface area, 1/2 of 1%. And that is hardly a snapshot of the entire world. And there's plenty of problems within those areas too, for anybody who knows trees. They're succumbing to fungus infections, and that's certainly a part of putting particulates in the atmosphere. It's a platform for fungal proliferation. The soil microbial life is being killed because of these toxins infecting the soils or contaminating the soils. But the bottom line is we're in the fast track to a lifeless planet, and even now, very few see it. And would you say this is the case with your science colleagues, Ray, that they don't seem to be able to see even a few feet in front of them. They're caught up, as you stated, with their pursuit for grants and continued paychecks and pensions, and not seemingly able to consider the fact that we're all perilously close to the end of the road.
Well, and it's even more apparent on how much further they push this down in the news when the COVID takes center stage. I mean, you don't hear anything of the geoengineering going on because of COVID takes center stage. So you know that the media is not giving this information to people. Your organization, Geoengineering Watch, is the single greatest source of information on what's happening in the world with our atmosphere, with the waters, with the Fukushima, everything. But people aren't taking advantage of it. They're planted themselves in front of the television. They go to work, they come home, they have their beer, they drink, they watch their football games, and repeat. They get in their mobile home and they go somewhere. Only some of them go to the places they used to go up in the forest and find out it's not there anymore. The trees are dead.
They are dead. They're dead and dying. And it appears that the climate engineers are yet again setting the stage for massive incinerations in the western U.S. They're cutting off the flow of precipitation. As we've reported at geoengineeringwatch.org, it appears that the boreal forest incinerations or northern latitude forest incinerations are being used to further load the atmosphere with light scattering particulates that remain in the atmosphere a longer period of time if the fires burn much hotter, as much as several months. They can rotate the planet several times, and peer-reviewed science study actually advocates for the polar cooling effect of northern latitude forest fires. Is that not complete insanity? Incinerating the Earth's life support systems or facilitating it. And again, the cause of ignition is a secondary subject. Whatever the cause of ignition, the template being set for forest fire incinerations is absolutely a core causal factor of climate engineering. So this is, again, the level of insanity we see with completely interfering with Earth's life support systems. Back to the CV19 scenario and the disintegrating UV, or the ozone layer, which is releasing immense UV radiation. If there's any positive side to any of this, that UVC radiation is sterilizing for microbial life. We know it's used to sterilize labs. UVC radiation is used for that purpose. And now we have just recently seen an acknowledgement, because they can't hide it any longer from the science community, that being out in the sun kills CV19 8 times faster than previously stated. How do they miss by that much? Because they're doing their best to hide what they can as long as they can, and when they can no longer hide it, they have to admit to it. And what are they telling the population to do? Stay inside, stay out of the sun. Don't increase your vitamin D levels. And this exposure to this UVC radiation, again, if there's any positive to this, aside from the fact that it's killing the entire planet, it also kills CV19, and we're not being told about that either, are we?
No. Interesting note on that. CNN had a brief mention of Johns Hopkins University doing studies on UV radiation and COVID. I think that the blurb was probably 10 seconds long, and then nothing. Okay. Johns Hopkins University found that UVC radiation would basically destroy the DNA, and it was, see, that's the 270 nanometers, from 250 to 280 nanometers is used as a germicidal radiation for hospitals, for surgical instruments, because it kills DNA. It kills all DNA.
And we're getting those spectrums. You are metering UVC radiation within that spectrum range on the surface now.
Yes.
And that's what people need to understand, that this level of radiation, which again is affecting the entire web of life, is on the surface now.
We have a health agency called NIOSH, NIOSH, and they have established radiation protocols for maximum radiation exposure for lab technicians. who handle UVC germicidal lamps. They state no more than 0.1 microwatt per hour over an 8-hour period. So the maximum total radiation exposure is 0.8 microwatts after 8 hours. That is an acceptable level. That is the maximum acceptable level.
And where are we at if someone had that much time exposure in the sun today?
Dana measured it yesterday. We're at 1.7.
That puts it into context.
Right now, 1.7 microwatts per square centimeter right now, this instant.
Many times above any recognized safe limit and zero disclosure from any official agency.
Exactly. Now you take 8 hours of exposure, and of course you can't be in the sun for 8 hours. Let's pick half of that. So let's put 4 times 1.7. All of a sudden you've got radiation levels that the higher radiation levels will go to deeper levels in your skin, and that's where typically you go out for 10 minutes and the depth of penetration is on the average of about 3 to 4 millimeters. But the longer you stay, as soon as you feel that stinging is telling you that your skin is being damaged. Okay, if you stay out there and ignore that, from that point on, it's exponential. If you stay out for 10 minutes and another 10 minutes, the damage is going to be 10 times worse. Okay, and that's the part that people don't get. It's an exponential function.
In regard, and this is to our own individual health, in regard to the ability of the planet's life support systems to feed populations, which you alluded to earlier, we are very close to losing our ability to grow food. What we're seeing already, and I just toured some of the agricultural regions in California, and the sun scorch is incredibly evident. In fact, some orchards are being torn out of the ground because the trees are so fried. They're very misshapen. The branches are misshapen. The trees, the leaves themselves are mutated looking. On the perimeter of some of the orchards, I believe almonds in particular, they're spraying a chemical to coat the leaves to try to protect them from this massive UV because the perimeter trees are most exposed. And again, we're seeing a horrific amount of damage on the foliage as a whole. And this is, again, on top of the unprecedented drought that now statistically is the worst in 1,200 years based on paleo data. That's not being admitted to either. This is in addition to the soil contamination from the toxic heavy metals and polymers that are coming down in precipitations, which lab tests prove. This is not speculation. And we know in the case of aluminum that when root systems are exposed to bioavailable aluminum, they shut down nutrient uptake, they die a slow, protracted death. But the bottom line is, even if we looked at the UV issue alone and we ignored everything else, that issue alone is very rapidly diminishing our ability to produce food. Is that correct, Ray?
That's absolutely correct. And what a lot of people don't realize is that most of our oxygen comes from plankton.
Correct.
Okay? And the UVB, UVC penetration in the ocean is much deeper than scientists ever imagined. They've measured UVB down to 15 meters, Dane. When that gets into the plankton, and you've seen the reduction in plankton, you've seen the reduction in krill, you've seen our coral reefs, and you more so than the average human, you understand what's happening. They have suffered a death that people just don't get yet. Over 66% of our oxygen comes from plankton. So if we reduce the ability to make oxygen to begin with, plus we're doing the geoengineering to the atmosphere, our ozone layer is not going to last at all. It's going to be gone.
In regard to the die-off of plankton, Ray, that you so accurately describe and the ramifications that are so incredibly grave, we are on the fast track to what would be termed Canfield Ocean, a superheated, oxygenless, lifeless, stratified dead zone. in the oceans. Again, that's known as Canfield Ocean. You've communicated to Professor Canfield directly, have you not? And what were the results of those communications?
Professor Canfield has done extensive research in the South Pacific. And because of the Canfield Ocean effects, I wanted to know how much UV radiation metrology they've performed during their research projects. And they do have a person with the research staff that is an expert with that, and they're planning on using more technology to measure and get data in the South Pacific area where his current research project is going on. And I hope to see that, but this is past tense. What we have in the oceans right now is something, no matter what happens to the ozone layer, it can't fix the oceans, Dane.
Yeah, this is where, again, the tunnel vision of those in power that are completely blinded to anything but their quest for power has ignored the consequences of their actions. We see that throughout history. And it's interesting how many people state and how many times I hear that they wouldn't do this to themselves, the proverbial they, those at the top, those who print the money, who own militaries, thus they own countries. They do whatever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want. Did they ask our permission to detonate over 2,000 nuclear bombs on planet Earth that contaminated everything, including themselves? They did this to themselves. We have Fukushima, an ongoing triple nuclear volcano meltdown with no known technology to fix it, no end in sight. We have 440 additional nuke plants all over the world. We're building 60 more right now. They don't care or comprehend the consequences of their actions, even to themselves. That's the fact of the matter. And that's where climate engineering fits into the equation. The crown jewel weapon of the military-industrial complex, a weapon by which they can topple countries, bring them to their knees without the populations of those countries ever even knowing they were at war or under assault. And again, no regard for the consequences. I would argue, Ray, based on all the data we do have, that in addition to all the forms of destructive human activity on the planet, that this one issue alone, climate engineering and everything that it entails, again, the ionizing of the atmosphere for over-the-horizon communications, for EMP offense and defense. We have the effort now, it seems, Project Lucy and Project Alamo. Those are acronyms for the incredibly insane effort, it appears, these programs already in operation, to microwave the atmosphere with opposing frequencies in a desperate and unimaginably destructive attempt to degrade the buildup of methane in atmosphere. It's one layer of insanity heaped on top of another, and we are on the fast track to near-term human extinction. And Ray, I want your assessment in summary here, that even optimistically, conservatively, if we remain on the current track and the current rate of ozone destruction continues, again, ozone destruction that is most directly linked to climate engineering operations and all that they entail, the spraying of particulates into the atmosphere causing ozone destruction, the radio frequency microwave transmissions that are used to manipulate these particulates, based on everything we know, again, conservatively, would you estimate that we have less than a decade? And I think that's very conservative. And that doesn't mean business as usual until then. It means that we are on a downhill free fall until that point. But within a decade, if we remain on the current course, life on planet Earth, in most, if not all ways, may be over.
That's a very conservative estimate, Dane. I'm beginning to wonder if 2025 is realistic. Things are just happening too fast.
On that note, and what you just stated, happening too fast, and Einstein stated this, one of the major folly of mankind is their inability to understand the exponential equation. And that is a key part of this that just doesn't fit into people's reality. Is that not true? That this equation is so unimaginably non-linear that people simply can't comprehend the exponential factor of how fast the Earth's life support systems are disintegrating.
Exactly. you experienced a situation with the frogs. And that situation happened because there was a hole in the ozone that passed over that area.
Yeah, they were, for those listeners that didn't see that video, it's an Into the Wild video on geoengineeringwatch.org. Saw a very anomalous bullfrog hatch, literally thousands of bullfrogs in a place they weren't normally at. And I monitored those frogs, and over the course of the coming 2 weeks, the sunlight was so intense, they were literally frying on the mud only feet from the water, and that's all on film on the record at geoengineeringwatch.org. And could there have been other factors involved in that equation? Possibly, but nothing that would do that. As far as water contamination or any other source of potentially lethal impact on those frogs, the only factor that there's any validity to or verifiable information on would be the intense UV radiation, which was occurring during that time, and they were literally frying on the beach where they would normally be able to sit, or not on the beach, on a little mud flat where they would have normally been able to sit all day, and they were literally cooking in their tracks.
Exactly. And the sad part is we've created so many ozone holes over the years, starting with the nuclear tests that took place. Those could make ozone holes 1,000 miles wide. And it takes time for the ozone to recombine at altitude.
And people don't realize that. Any rocket launch literally tears a hole in the ozone layer as well, correct?
Exactly. The space shuttle, all of the launches, depending on the size of the rockets, like the Saturn V, that makes an immediate 10-mile wide hole in the ozone layer on its initial launch. And if you can imagine it, it's like you're going through. You remember those old oil lamps? They called them lava lamps. If you could imagine an oil surface, just turning it on and then being penetrated from below and making a hole in the top, and then having the hole expand. Okay, as it continues to destroy the ozone layer. It's kind of a cheap analogy, but I'm trying to give you a visualization over what happens when you disturb the air like that. It's like a fan effect. Once you start the fan up, it continues to expand. Atmospheric physics is the most single complex issue in physics, of particle physics, that exists. China made the fastest computer in the world to study climate engineering. And it's 150 petaflops, phenomenally fast. But that computer still can't do it.
And even with all that in mind, what we have in essence right now is the global climate engineering cabal utilizing the atmosphere for testing all of these processes. They're using the atmosphere for a giant physics lab with unknown consequences. Is that a correct assessment?
Exactly. It's like listening to Lyndon Johnson over and over and over. I mean, when do these people catch on that what they're talking about is total global destruction? When do they catch on to that? And there's no place to hide.
There isn't any place to hide. In regard to the ozone layer, it's important for people to understand that is not a uniform depletion, as you just tried to describe. It waxes and wanes, and it is, again, not uniform. So it depends on where you're at, where the particular depletion elements may be, or what other factors, wind currents, cloud cover. But it is not a uniform depletion. But overall, we are losing it rapidly. And without the ozone layer, it's game over on planet Earth. Ray, in summary, what would your warning be to humanity based on all the research you have done? And what would your message be to the climate engineers?
There's only one answer to that, Dane. Stop all geoengineering.
And on timeframes, what would your warning be to humanity based on your research? How much time do we have based on the ozone depletion alone, not taking into account all the other factors that are destroying the planet's life support systems, but on the ozone factor alone? what would your warning of a time frame be? And not to pin you into a date, but if we stay in the particular trajectory, and that's the important part of this equation, if we remain in the current trajectory, where does it appear we end up and how soon?
I still think 2025 is a conservative estimate. It could happen before that, Dane.
Because of the non-linear nature of these systems, once they begin to unravel, feedback loops kick in,
Yes.
and they become unimaginably exponential, correct?
Exactly.
Ray, speaking on behalf of geoengineeringwatch.org, I'm very grateful for your diligence, your dedication to the whole, the unyielding effort you have made to try to continue monitoring this key core issue of our ability to survive on this planet. It is key to everything. I personally, based on 20 years of research on the geoengineering issue, its ramifications, and the damage to the planet from every other form of human activity. That's important to state because many in the environmental communities feel somehow we're ignoring the rest. We're not ignoring the rest. Not at all. We never have. We're simply stating it's necessary to focus on the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat first, where the boat goes down. And I personally am the most concerned about the ozone depletion over anything else. And I'm concerned about everything else. But this takes precedent because it is so core to anything continuing. Again, the planet loses its life support systems, i.e. its cloud-making ability, plankton, forest die-off, microbial die-off. We are in a very short rope on the current course. And I remember the day when I really began to, when I first actually had the experience that drove home how bad the ozone depletion was 20 years ago, operating a D6 cat on the side of a mountain, creating trails for habitat for the native wildlife, open window on the Caterpillar dozer, sun shining against my arm, and it was so intense. And although I knew there was a problem, at that moment I knew the problem was beyond severe. And that's, again, you remember those epiphanies you have along the way. That was 20 years ago. It's gotten unimaginably worse since. I'm extraordinarily grateful to you for your tangible efforts to sound the alarm with credible data, with actual metering. And again, Ray, you're the only one. You are the only one on the planet that is disclosing this kind of metering, and you have dedicated yourself wholly to this task for the good of the human race and the web of life. And I want to extend my personal gratitude to you for that, Ray.
Well, there's no money that can pay me to do this, Dane. I don't take money from anybody for this research because we have to do this. We have to find a way to wake people up.
I feel the same. You know I feel the same. I can't not do this, and I will continue until my last breath, and I know you'll do the same. And Ray, until we connect again, to update again, and we will hope that at that point, somewhere down the road, that the public has understood that we are literally in a very immediate fight for life. And if we can awaken the population to that fact, if we can push the climate engineering insanity to the full light of day, we can cause a shockwave around the world. We could mobilize populations into taking to the streets, if you will, with their proverbial pitchforks and torches and holding legally and morally responsible anyone, everyone involved with these programs, the servicing of these programs, and the covering up of these programs. And that involves all mainstream media, all official weather disseminating sources, which are all owned by power structure entities. We must mobilize global populations into understanding they are fighting for their lives. We need to deal with this issue first and foremost. If we can force this to the light and force it to a halt and allow the planet to respond to the damage done, we may at least, at minimum, buy time. And that is an effort worth fighting for.
start, because you've done your own little some vax study, haven't you?
Sort of. not on purpose, but yes. So,
how old are your children?
I have an 8-year-old boy, a 5-year-old girl, and a 3-year-old girl.
Okay, and so it's so important this. Could I describe you as anti-vaccine when you were pregnant with your first child?
Oh, hell no. Oh, no. No. I stood there and said to the nurse at his 6-week shots that it should be mandatory, and I couldn't understand why anybody wouldn't do it.
So you thought vaccines should be mandatory?
Yes. And the nurse said to me very quietly, be grateful that they aren't. And I remember looking at her thinking, why would you say something like that? Well, I learned the hard way. He had the vitamin K shot when he was born. I had a whole heap of vaccinations about 8 months to a year before he was conceived.
Okay, do you know what kind of vaccine?
Definitely yellow fever. I think MMR. It was a whole heap because we were travelling through Africa. I actually didn't even look, to be honest. I just walked into the travel clinic and said, this is where we're going. Line them up. And I got really tired after that. I was so fatigued. I don't even remember half the trip through Africa because I just slept all the time. I had no energy. We came home, we got married, and then I got pregnant. And I got really, really tired. I struggled through my pregnancy, and the doctor kept saying to me, nothing to worry about, you're just pregnant. And I was like, I can't even get out of bed. I go out to visit friends and I pass out on their couch. I mean, I've got no energy at all. They dismissed it right through my whole pregnancy as just being pregnant, not a big deal, but it was not. And then he was born, he had the vitamin K, and he was unsettled to start. He never slept very well. Then he got those milk spots. He was a bit of a colicky baby, but his bowel motions and everything were pretty normal to start with, breast milk bowel motions. And then he had his 6-week shots, and he actually had them a little bit late. I think it was 7 or 8 weeks that he had them. And he then developed eczema, and he started screaming through the nights, screaming to the point where he was going like a purple-blue colour, and his veins were popping up the side of his neck, and I mean, it's just horrendous. I remember one day sitting there holding this little boy like this, just looking at him while he was screaming, and I was sitting on the couch, and I was like, I've done everything. I've tried to feed you, I've changed your nappy, I've cuddled you, I've tried to settle you, it's been days, you're not sleeping, and these veins were just popping up the side of his neck, and I was just sitting there for, I don't know, hours, just sitting there staring at this child, just the tears streaming down my face, like, because the doctors just weren't listening. I'd go in, I'd be like, this child is not sleeping, this child is not feeding properly, and they'd be like, do you know what the doctor said to me? He said to me, babies cry, go home. You need to go home, babies cry, deal with it, find a way to deal with it. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then they sort of started saying, oh, reflux baby, this way, that way. He had a bit of fluid on his kidneys when he was born, so they sent him for a, I can't remember what it's called now, MCU or something, where they pump dye through them, and they have a look to see if there's reflux in the kidneys and things like that. At that stage, it was somewhere between the 6-week shots and the 3-month shots. He was tiny. And they gave him, it was the most horrendous experience. I could hear him screaming down the passageway. It was awful. And then after that, they gave him his first course of antibiotics, 3-day, what did they say? It was like a precautionary antibiotics, just in case he developed an infection. So that was his first lot of antibiotics. He was only a couple of months old. And then I just remember him getting worse and worse and worse. The reflux, the bowel motions started to go really bad. He developed thrush, like his skin used to peel off, and the eczema, and then he had his 3-month shots, and things got so much worse. He stopped feeding because I was trying to breastfeed. He started pushing away, he was hitting me, and he just wouldn't feed properly, wouldn't sleep properly. This child didn't actually sleep more than 15 or 20 minutes at a time. His reflux got so bad, they put him on Losec, really high doses of Losec, and at the time I didn't really know that they were high doses of Losec. I just gave it to him because I needed him to sleep. But it just took the edge off, it didn't actually help. And that was 3 months. And then by coming up to the 5-month shots, I'd taken him off of breastfeeding because the doctor had suggested we try formula. And I tried him on soy formula. Oh no. Because we were suspecting intolerances to potentially milk products and things like that in foods at that stage already. And so he went on to soy formula, and that seemed to be a little bit better. but still not good. And then he had his 5-month shots, and the reflux got so bad that I was just like, this is insane. And then the bowel motions went really funny, like even worse than what they'd been already, frothy and green and weird, and his skin was peeling off his backside at this stage, and there was nothing that was stopping it. And 2 weeks later, he started running, it was about 2 weeks, within 2 weeks, he started running this really high temperature after his 5-month shots. And we went into the hospital, and I was fighting with the nurses because they wanted to send him home. I was like, something's really wrong with my child. And they were like, oh, he's just got a gastro bug, he'll be fine. And it was while I was standing there fighting with this nurse that she was trying to discharge me. I was like, I'm not going home. And he vomited all over her and went all floppy and limp. And all of a sudden, you would just see everybody rush into the room, and he was so badly dehydrated. And they were trying to send me home with this really badly dehydrated child. And they had to get an IV into him. And then they kept saying to me it was gastro. They did all these tests on him, blood tests, stool tests, you name it, all came back negative.
Are you realising it's the vaccines at this point?
No.
Or still not?
I had no idea. At that stage, I was thinking food allergies and reflux. Because that's all that the doctors had been saying to me at that stage. So it took me quite a few months to get the doctors to even acknowledge that it wasn't just colic. And then it took a while for them to, they put him onto the Losic and the hypoallergenic formula after. Well, he was on the Losic already before this, and at the 5 months we ended up in hospital. And I actually refused to leave the hospital because they kept trying to discharge us with a diagnosis of gastroenteritis, gastro bug of some description. I was like, it's just not that. When I look back on his medical notes, he had bowel changes and vomiting sort of almost after the vaccine, screaming, restlessness, not sleeping again. And the pattern was there. You could see it when you look through the notes when I went back and did it later. At this stage I had no idea about the vaccines, and I was just thinking, this child's getting worse and worse and worse, and I don't know why. And so the paediatrician came in and saw me a couple of days later. I actually stayed a couple of days extra in the hospital because I refused to leave. And he was there when he passed the bowel motion, and he said to me, oh yeah, that's not normal. And I was like, you think? And so he then put him onto a hypoallergenic formula called Neocate, and that did help.
Yeah.
And over the next few months, and again, no more shots after that for a while, he slowly started to improve. His sleep got a little bit better. It still wasn't fantastic. His eczema started to clear a little bit. I mean, by then he'd been on steroid creams and all sorts of things. I mean, if you look back, it's just one medication after another medication after another medication. The list is long. And so we get to about 8 or 9 months, and he's sort of settled. He's developing well, though. He's hitting all his milestones. He's laughing, smiling, rolling, sitting. All that stuff was really good. It was just the more medical side of it, like along the lines of eczema, allergies, all that kind of thing that wasn't good. Reflux, extreme reflux. He was taking a higher dose of Losic than my dad, who's a grown man. And it just took the edge off. And then I remember phoning my mum when he was about 8 or 9 months old, and we'd had the first 2 hours where I'd had a happy, smiley baby for 2 hours. And I said to her, is this what it feels like to be a mum? I got a smile out of my child. I sat and played with him on the floor. And I was like, wow, is this how other mums feel when they've got happy, settled babies? I've never had that, really. 10, 15 minutes and my child was crying almost all the time, relentlessly. Anyway, by about a year old, he had a really bad stomach bug. He picked up a stomach bug somewhere around a year old, and then tonsillitis infection. We never had the ear infection thing with my son, never. That wasn't an issue for us. And then 15 months came, and he was sickly. I knew something wasn't right with his immune system. He was always very pale. He had his big black rings under his eyes. And I delayed the 15-month ones until he was 18 months. And at 18 months I went in, and I actually asked for an appointment with the GP because I wanted him to check him, because I just had this feeling, you know. And he looked at him and said to me, no, he's absolutely fine. I said to him, I'm a bit worried about his immune system. Do you think we should be doing this, or should we just delay it for a bit? No, he's fine, we're going to do it. He gave him a full examination and passed him that morning. He said to me, it's all good. We gave him his shots.
What did he have?
He had MMR, Prevnar 7, I think it was at the time, and then I think he had Hib and Hep B, all in one day. And then got home, and that afternoon he was talking and walking by the age of 1. people used to say to me, your child is so advanced in that area. Like, wow, is he really only one? You know, because he was actually like 2-3 word sentences and stuff like that easily. And very smart, quick, switched on child. And we got home, and I remember a couple of hours later, he was holding his teeth like this, and he was pulling at his teeth. Mummy, my head hurts, Mummy, head hurts. And I was like, oh wow, you know, like he was really in pain. Phoned the nurse at the clinic, and I said, look, I think he's had a bit of a reaction to the vaccines this morning. And I explained everything that was going on. I mean, he was really unsettled. He didn't really have too much of a temperature that day, but the head, it was just obviously, you know, it was really intense. I'd never seen him do anything like that before. And the nurse said to me, oh, you need to bring him back in, could possibly be a reaction. I got back in, saw the GP, and the GP said to me, no, not possible, don't think so. And I was like, what do you mean not possible? And he was like, oh, no, it's highly unlikely. I was like, but possible. And eventually he kind of said, look, it is possible, but I just don't think it is. And it's far more likely to be a coincidence, and it's probably just a migraine. And I was like, really? He's never had a migraine. Well, you know, he's so little, how do you know? But I was like, not that I'm aware of. Anyway, I left there and I was just thinking, something doesn't feel right. Anyway, so then during that week he started to run temperatures. He got sick, he got a cough, and he just generally wasn't very well. I think his tonsils flared up as well from memory. And then within a month, I was back there questioning his balance. His balance had started going off, and he would walk down the passageway and one of his legs would just get a little bit limp. No, it wasn't really obvious, it was quite slight, but he was falling over a lot. And that's when it started, and so his motor skills started to sort of just go. Things he was doing quite confidently before, he used to fall so much, and then he started stuttering on words that he had already had so clearly. And so I was in and out of the doctors all the time. Look, something's not right here, you know, something's really not right here. I'm really concerned. Dismiss me, paranoid mother. And then I went in one day and I had this huge fight with him, because I said, look, I know he's not actually sick right now, as in, you know, this is as good as he gets. And he was pale with these massive big black rings under his eyes, and I actually just went in there to have this conversation with the doctor, because I was like, I'm really concerned about my child. And I said to him, something is not right. And he said to me, he examined him, and he gave me this really stupid look, as if like, you are wasting my time, woman. There is nothing clinically wrong with this child. And I said, well, I disagree. This is as good as it gets, and he is not healthy. And so eventually, to get me out of his office, he agreed to run blood tests. And I said to him, fine, I'll do them. Because he was like, is that what you really want? Like, this was going to be the most awful thing for my child.
Blood test for what?
Blood test, just a general blood count, blood test, nothing specific. And those blood tests came back and they showed a really high C-reactive protein, really low lymphocytes, high monocytes, and a few other things. I mean, and this is not good stuff. I mean, my child was not good. There was all sorts of stuff going on in his body, and the doctor phoned me the next morning really sheepishly saying to me when the results came back in, oh yeah, something's not right, we actually need you to come back in. I was like, we need you to come back in so we can discuss his blood test. I was so angry with him at that stage. I was just like, you know what? You mean that child that you said to me was clinically nothing wrong with him? I was like, I don't think so, I'm going to go see another doctor. And I did go in, and I saw, a little while after that, I saw another doctor, a more integrated holistic doctor. It was the first time I'd done that. I didn't even know that you had integrated holistic doctors. I didn't know what a naturopath was. I didn't know anything about holistic medicine. I mean, medicine was a GP. That's what I knew. That's what I did. But a friend had recommended that I go and see a naturopath, and I was like, what the hell is a naturopath? So I started looking into it, and then I found this GP that had a more holistic sort of view on things, and we went and we saw him. And he spent 2 hours with me, and he just listened. And at the end of that, he sort of suggested some dietary changes, and he gave me a whole lot of information and said, you need to go and read this stuff. And then he put him on to some very basic supplements, vitamin C, cod liver oil, probiotics, vitamin D, stuff like that. Reasonably high-ish doses. and said, once you've learnt a bit more, you'll start. That's all he did, but that's where I started to really start looking into things and learning more and more and more. And I think the vitamin C and stuff really did start to help. Like he wasn't, almost like he slowed down. That regression slowed down for him. The stuttering was still quite bad. The behaviour was terrible. Like ADHD, hyperactivity, defiant. It got to the point where he was just really hard to manage. We couldn't give him anything with colours in it, or sugar, or anything like that. He just used to lose the plot. Like I've heard you say many times, diet, diet, diet. It is so important for these kids. They've got to have such clean diets. And then it really came to a point when his daycare got hold of me and said to me, something's wrong with your child's motor skills. He's actually...
With your child's what?
Motor skills, his gross motor skills.
Yeah,
you know, he's falling over when he used to be able to walk down the bar, like they used to have these little things that the kids walk on and play on, like the jungle gym areas and stuff. He's actually falling over all the time.
Is it, you know, in Vax where that little boy, Gina Reed's boy, falls over? Did you see that?
Yes, that is...
That boy had Prevnar as well.
Did he? So I didn't know that. Obviously, when I saw that little boy, I was like, oh my goodness. But he was much more severe than my child, because that's why I said to my mum when we watched it, I was like, he actually is struggling to actually stand up and walk. Dylan used to be able to walk, but then the one side would just give, and then he would fall over, and then he'd get back up. And so it was a little bit, it was a little bit different, not quite as severe, but it was definitely there, and it was going quite slowly. And the daycare complained, and we've been in to see my doctor about this so many times, dismiss us. Just, it's developmental, sometimes it'll go away. And it wasn't going away, and I went in and I said to him, we had a weekend away, where I don't know what happened, but it was like something had snapped in him, and he went really quiet, stopped talking to me, and when he was talking so quietly that you couldn't hear him, and then he stopped making eye contact over that weekend. He was crying the whole time, and everybody, because we were away with family and friends, but really close family and friends, people that had known him since he was born, and people were coming to me and saying to me, what is wrong with him? Why is he doing this? Like, has something happened? I'm like, no, and I don't know what's wrong with him. And it was around the same time that the daycare had said to me, look, we're noticing that his gross motor skills are just shocking, like he's going backwards, not forwards. So I went back into the GP and I demanded that we got sent on to a specialist. And the specialist said to us, yes, basically there's something there. Well, I mentioned to him that I was concerned that this started from the vaccines. And the specialist said to us, well, he glazed over, wasn't interested in listening to the vaccine thing, wasn't even interested in talking about that, and so that was quite clear from the beginning. At the end of the consult, he said to us, yep, it looks like there's definitely something going on here. He threw ADHD into the report that he wrote for the doctor, and he basically just said, and while we were talking to him, he was saying things like oppositional defiance disorder, ADHD, just a difficult child. He's a smart child, but he's a difficult child, and you're going to have to bring him back when he starts school, and we'll have to look at medication at that stage. And I was like, what kind of medication? And he was like, possibly Prozac or Ritalin or stuff like that. And I just remember looking at him, I was like, I've got this 2-year-old boy. He was almost 3 at that stage. He was 2.5. And I said to him, I don't want him on that stuff. And I want to do something now. I don't want to wait till he's like 5 or 6. What can we do now? And he said to me, nothing. Bring him back when he's 5 or 6. Once we've had a report from the school, we'll put him on medication. I remember walking out of that appointment feeling absolutely helpless. I was like, this is insane. I need to help my boy now. And I was so angry at that stage with pediatricians and doctors. And I just carried on with what we were doing. And I was pregnant with my second child at that stage. And then she was born. And I mean, we were okay. We were managing diet changes, those few supplements that doctor put us on. We were okay. We were managing. I was seeing a chiropractor at that stage as well. And that not talking and stuff, it only lasted a few days. And then he sort of came out of it. But he still wasn't right. And then my daughter came along, and I just had this feeling and not to mention all the tonsillitis infections. So after his 18-month shots, this child had tonsillitis after tonsillitis, antibiotic after antibiotic. So, that would have been adding to things as well. He was so sick. So quickly my daughter was born, and I just thought, I can't do this. I just can't do this. So then I started researching really, really hard, and I was reading all the data sheets in New Zealand. We get data sheets that MedSafe does, and I read all those, and my husband and I read them, and we looked at each other, we're like, we can't do this. And so that's when I started researching vaccines in more detail. So my daughter she had the vitamin K injection. She was a little bit jaundiced, but she's healthier than my son was. And then that was my second child. And then we had another girl, and we gave her oral vitamin K. Now I wouldn't give vitamin K at all, because I think that upset her gut a little bit. My third child was also completely vaccine-free, other than the vitamin K. She's never been into hospital. She's hardly seen the doctor. She's had Haemophilus influenza, no antibiotics. She recovered in less than a week. All my kids have had chicken pox, and the one that was the sickest, the one that always goes down the hardest, is my vaccinated child. And the other two recover so much quicker and are so much stronger. And my 4-year-old now, she's the one that's only seen a doctor a handful of times, and the one that had diagnosed Haemophilus influenza. She was swabbed. It wasn't just we think she might have. She definitely had it. And when I look at, she was sick. It took a few days. She was really sick for about 2 or 3 days. But when I look at some of the things, like when kids had chickenpox, Haemophilus influenza, and I just think to myself, I would do that in a heartbeat over the screaming, the crying, the sickly child, the exhaustion, the worry, the stress. It was just horrendous what we went through with my first child, and it was ongoing and relentless, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So what's your conclusion? Vax versus unvax study in your plan?
I would never vaccinate another child over my dead body ever again.
So you've gone from wanting vaccines mandated to never vaccinate your
Pretty
child?
much. Never, ever, ever.
You're going to miss your flight. You have to
I
go.
have to go.
Give me YouTube. I'll take this a second. Wait, you good?
Give me my finger.
Thank you so much, and for all the work you've done for New Zealand tour.
Only a pleasure.
Yeah, you're great. I'm sorry we had to rush the end of your story, but I think everybody gets it.
Yeah.
And so
Bye, Polly. Bye, no.